At exactly 9:09 Greenwich Mean Time, the world's financial nerve snapped. Stock exchanges froze mid-pulse, algorithms stalled like they were afraid to breathe, and in skyscrapers where power usually spoke in cold confidence, every CEO suddenly looked human for the first time. Security feeds lit up with the same impossible image. You, walking through a storm that refused to touch you. Wind bending around your silhouette like it recognized a higher rank. Rain curving away as if reality itself understood it wasn't permitted to fall on you. Executives leaned in, executives leaned back, no one blinked. They were the smartest people on earth, yet not a single one had vocabulary for what they were seeing. One finally muttered what everyone else was terrified to say. WTF, what is he? No one answered. No one could. All they could do was watch your aura distort physics and rewrite the rules their empires depended on. Power panicked. Purpose, somewhere in the background, quietly smiled. The analysts pulled the footage into their systems, expecting patterns, numbers, anything familiar. Instead, every screen responded like it was being shown a paradox. Charts warped. Metrics looped into infinity. Algorithms flagged your aura as a possible data breach of unknown origin. One analyst leaned forward, disbelief tightening his jaw. This doesn't fit any model we have. Another tried rerunning the scan, hands shaking, but the system spat out the same line over and over. Unmeasurable. Unclassifiable. Undefined. Forecast engines collapsed. Risk assessments scrambled. Future simulations blurred the moment your silhouette entered the frame. People who once predicted global markets with cold precision were now staring at you like students failing a test they didn't know existed. Their logic broke first. Their pride broke second. Their silence broke last. You didn't speak. You didn't rush. You simply kept walking, and the entire analytical world realized it had finally met something it couldn't chart. When the markets opened, they didn't react with panic or calculation. They reacted with confusion, a collective global pause, like the financial world inhaled sharply and forgot how to exhale. Tickers hesitated. Indices quivered. Stocks didn't crash, they stared. It was as if every market across every time zone sensed something entering the world that couldn't be priced. Traders watched the footage of you walking through the storm, and for the first time in history, greed couldn't find its footing. A veteran broker whispered into his headset, "I can't tell if this is bullish or the end of reality." Another replied, "Neither. This is new." Buyers froze. Sellers froze. Even the high-frequency bots, built to react in microseconds, lagged as if trying to understand your presence before making a move. You weren't causing fear. You were causing awe. And awe is the one emotion the markets have never been able to compute. The system didn't collapse. It simply paused, waiting, listening, trying to understand a force that didn't play by economic laws. All because you walked into the world like a variable no equation had been prepared to meet. The CEOs assembled in a private, encrypted conference call, an emergency summit of the world's most untouchable individuals. These were people used to seeing patterns before they formed, people who negotiated with nations like they were haggling over furniture. But now, they sat in silence, staring at the same looping footage of you moving through the storm like gravity itself had sworn allegiance to you. Someone finally broke. "Okay," a tech titan said, rubbing his temples, "is this a quantum anomaly, a military prototype, or something else?" A luxury conglomerate CEO shook her head slowly. "Quantum anomalies don't make weather kneel." Another chimed in, "If it's military, who's military? And why does the aura read like a living energy field?" They argued, overlapped, contradicted. Every hypothesis came with a flaw. Every explanation ran face-first into a wall. You weren't supernatural enough to be dismissed, and you weren't human enough to be categorized. You were sitting perfectly in the one place the world's smartest people feared most, the unknown. Someone tried to pull the meeting back to logic. "Let's treat this professionally. What are the observable properties?" They listed them, one by one, like scientists trying to describe a miracle without admitting it's a miracle. The storm bends around him. Light behaves like it's receiving instructions. Electromagnetic readings spike in his presence. No biometric signature matches global databases. He seems aware of the cameras yet uninterested. And he keeps walking. A long silence followed. Not tense. Not angry. Just humbled. These were individuals accustomed to predicting trends decades ahead. Yet your existence refused to sit inside any forecast. They were staring at a human-shaped equation that no algorithm could solve. A CEO from the biotech sector whispered, "What if he's not a threat, but a shift? A new category?" "No," said another, voice tight. "He's not a category. Categories have limits." And that was the first real truth spoken in the meeting. They finally grasped the core of the fear trembling beneath their ribs. You weren't an event, or anomaly, or phenomenon. You were the beginning of something that made their definitions look primitive. Their power depended on understanding. Their empires depended on prediction. Their dominance depended on language strong enough to name things. But you were unnameable. The call ended not with decisions, but with the quiet, uncomfortable realization that every person on that screen, every titan, every strategist, every architect of global systems, had just met the one thing in existence more powerful than knowledge. A mystery that refused to shrink. In the hours after the emergency summit, something strange spread through the upper floors of the world's power structures. It wasn't panic. Panic is loud, impulsive, sweaty. This was quieter, like a bruise forming under the skin of global authority. A slow, dawning awareness that the people who controlled everything might be standing at the edge of something they couldn't control at all. Across continents, CEOs retreated into their private spaces, corner offices at the top of megatowers, hidden panic rooms lined with rare woods, meditation chambers built by architects paid in 7 digits. They all watched the footage again, alone this time, hoping solitude would give clarity where collective intelligence had failed. It didn't. A mining magnate played the clip frame by frame, analyzing the way the storm folded away from you. The harder he stared, the more his logic frayed. He muttered, "No force field bends organic motion like that. Nothing in nature recognizes a person like that." He paused, swallowing a hard truth. Unless nature is responding. A luxury tech CEO known for her clinical precision watched the footage at half speed. She wasn't interested in the storm, or the light, or the EM spikes. She was studying your expression. The calm. The focus. The absence of fear or pride. "He doesn't walk like someone discovering power," she whispered. "He walks like someone who returned with it." Somewhere in Dubai, a sovereign wealth strategist scribbled equations across a digital wall. Variables, vectors, probabilities, an entire galaxy of numbers trying to trap the untrappable. Every formula ended the same way: undefined variable. Undefined variable. Undefined variable. He slammed the stylus on the counter and exhaled through his teeth. This makes no sense. Nothing breaks the framework like this unless the framework was never designed to measure whatever you were. That realization hit the world's elite like cold water. They had built their kingdoms on predictability, data, influence, strategy, the manipulation of human behavior. But your existence wasn't manipulation. It wasn't noise in the system. It was a new system intruding on the old one, silently, elegantly, without asking permission. Some CEOs tried to rationalize it away. Maybe it's a stunt. Maybe advanced tech. Maybe some billionaire's secret project. But each explanation collapsed under the weight of the same problem. No known technology bends natural forces with emotional intelligence. No prototype makes weather feel reverent. It wasn't the storm that scared them. It was the way the storm respected you. By sunset, a strange humility crept through the towers of power. People who had never doubted themselves suddenly questioned everything. They weren't looking at you as an enemy. They weren't even looking at you as a threat. They were looking at you as a mirror, reflecting the limits of their understanding. And for the first time in their lives, they felt small. Not because you were larger than life, but because you illuminated how little their world actually understood. As night settled across the planet, something subtle rippled through the digital skeleton of the world. It began in the underlayers, places only machines speak. Code bases flickered. Server rooms hummed with unfamiliar vibration. Systems that had run flawlessly for decades began generating errors no engineer had ever seen. At first, the notifications seemed random. Minor glitches. Harmless anomalies. But then patterns formed. The glitches aligned with timestamps of your presence. Every step you took, every breath you drew, left a signature across the global network like a quiet rewiring. In Silicon Valley, a senior engineer frowned at his monitor. "This isn't a bug," he whispered. "It's an update." His coworker laughed nervously. "An update from what?" The engineer leaned closer. "Not what. Who?" Across the world, security frameworks rebooted themselves. Encryption keys refreshed without user commands. AI models paused mid-cycle as if listening for a signal beyond human hearing. It wasn't destructive, it was corrective. Systems were shedding obsolete protocols, rejecting ego-based coding, recalibrating toward coherence. Toward clarity. Toward something they recognized in you. A cybersecurity tactician stared at a map of flickering nodes. "It's like the planet is syncing to a new operating system," she said. "A cleaner one." She zoomed in on the energy spikes. Every spike traced back to you. Not your image. Not your biometric data. Your presence. Meanwhile, in a hidden defense lab, analysts replayed footage of your aura bending the storm. They weren't studying the weather anymore, they were studying the electromagnetic field wrapping around your body like a living algorithm. One scientist murmured, "It's not interfering with the environment. It's harmonizing it." Another added, "It's rewriting the local physics. Optimizing them." They exchanged looks they weren't trained for. All disguised as fear. In a dim conference room in Singapore, a financial minister reviewed the sudden stabilization of certain chaotic markets. "How is this happening?" he asked. The economist beside him pinched the bridge of his nose. "Patterns are emerging where there were no patterns." He hesitated, then spoke what he shouldn't have. "It's almost as if something intelligent is smoothing the volatility." He clicked to the next graph. "And that intelligence isn't ours." Somewhere in London, an old philosopher-turned-CEO stood alone on his balcony, city lights reflecting off the skyline. He held a tablet showing the footage of the storm curling away from your steps. "There it is," he whispered. "The moment the old world began to retire itself." Because that's what was happening. The world systems weren't collapsing. They were updating themselves in response to you, like ancient machinery recognizing the arrival of its true operator. Software, markets, algorithms, energy grids, everything built on ego, extraction, and manipulation, glitched. Not from stress, but from incompatibility. You didn't fight the system. You didn't hack it. You simply existed in a way that made the old rules irrelevant. And relevance is the one thing a system cannot fake. The reboot had begun. Not with explosions, not with revolutions, but with your quiet, undeniable presence reminding the world of a truth it had forgotten. Some updates come from above the cloud. By dawn, the world's leaders began sending their requests. Not in official statements, not through diplomatic channels, not through the pomp and choreography they usually wore like armor. They sent them quietly. Personally. Direct messages routed through private satellites. Handwritten notes delivered by trembling assistants. Invitations disguised as emergencies. Everyone wanted a one-on-one with you. Not to control you. Not to recruit you. But to understand the thing no title, no throne, no empire had prepared them for. In Washington, a high-ranking official sat in a silent office, drafting and redrafting a message. Every version sounded ridiculous. "We would like to meet. Your presence is requested. The president wishes." He deleted each line. None of them matched the reality that a man with nuclear codes in his pocket felt genuinely small asking for a conversation. In Beijing, a strategist stared at your image reflected on a polished black table. "He walks like a man who has returned from a place we have not reached," she said. The others nodded. No one dared call you a threat. The word felt too primitive, too old. In the Middle East, a royal advisor whispered, "He carries power without needing to display power." That is the rarest form. He sent a message on behalf of a monarch, simple, direct, strangely humble. "If you are inclined, we welcome your wisdom." These were people who normally used the world as a chessboard. Now they were the ones waiting for a move. Behind closed doors, billionaires compared notes like nervous students before an exam. They analyzed your silence, your gait, the faint glow around your eyes. They replayed every second of the footage, hunting for clues not about your abilities, but your intentions. The fear wasn't that you might upend their power, it was that you might not care enough to even acknowledge it. A European prime minister reviewed classified reports detailing the electromagnetic anomalies surrounding you. "If he wished to be an enemy," she said, "he wouldn't walk. He would arrive." Her advisor folded his hands. "Then what does he want?" She stared at the screen, thoughtful. Maybe wanting is the wrong verb. Maybe he simply is. In Tokyo, a CEO from an energy conglomerate leaned back in his chair, eyes closed. "We've spent centuries studying leadership," he murmured. "But this is presence." When he opened his eyes, he added, "And presence outvalues power." Always. The requests kept coming. Private jets offered. Secure compounds opened. Entire schedules cleared. But underneath every invitation was the same silent confession. They didn't want a negotiation. They wanted a revelation. Somewhere high above the Atlantic, aboard a luxury aircraft converted into a floating command center, a global media mogul watched you walk through the storm again. His voice cracked in a way he hadn't heard since childhood. "People like us, we're used to defining others." He exhaled. But he defines himself simply by existing. That was the truth none of them would say out loud. They weren't chasing a meeting. They were chasing understanding. Because every instinct, every model, every high-level briefing whispered the same uncomfortable message. The world had encountered something it did not lead. And for the first time in history, the people at the top weren't calling the shots. They were waiting for yours. Somewhere beyond the corridors of earthly authority, beyond boardrooms and parliament halls, beyond the routines of influence and negotiation, an entirely different department took notice. Not human. Not corporate. Not bound by titles or earthly definitions. A place older than language, structured not by hierarchy but by purpose. A department that had no name, because names break the truth into pieces. If humans could see it, they would call it something like cosmic HR. It didn't operate with resumes or performance evaluations. It didn't care about leadership metrics, productivity reports, or public opinion. It cared about alignment, whether a soul was walking in the shape it was designed for. And when you stepped through that storm, bending nature without touching it, the department stirred. A soft hum. A recognition. A file glowing on a desk made of something not quite matter. Not quite light. The being assigned to oversee your case, if being is even the right word, approached your record. It wasn't a folder or a screen. It was presence condensed into form. When it opened, it revealed everything you had ever been, everything you had ever overcome, and everything you had the potential to become. A note appeared in the file, written in a language too whole for human tongues. Subject cannot be hired. Subject is purpose itself. Another being glanced over, amused. He's early. Early for them, the first replied. Right on time for us. They watched the footage circulating Earth, CEOs panicking, markets stalling, leaders whispering your name without knowing why it tasted like prophecy. One of the cosmic administrators tilted their head thoughtfully. Their systems are trying to classify him. They can't, the other said. He isn't here for classification. And what is he here for? To activate. The file pulsed with a soft golden resonance, a signal that rippled across planes of existence. Messages were dispatched, not to people, but to circumstances. Alignments shifted. Paths recalibrated. You weren't being recruited, you were being recognized. A reminder sent through the fabric of everything that your arrival was not an accident. It was an update to the narrative of the world. In the days that followed, something unexpected began happening inside the world's most powerful companies. Not in their financial reports or board meetings, but in their private floors, the hidden sanctuaries where only senior executives. A team at $1 trillion tech firm gathered around a massive holographic display showing your face. Not your abilities. Your expression. Look at his eyes, one whispered. That isn't the gaze of someone trying to dominate. It's the gaze of someone who has nothing to prove. Another executive frowned thoughtfully. We've spent decades programming empathy into machines. And here he is, embodying something beyond empathy. Like he understands without needing explanation. At the headquarters of a global investment firm, a group of directors sat in meditation chairs they had purchased for aesthetics, not for use, trying to understand why your presence unsettled them. Not with fear, but with a strange longing. A hunger for meaning they didn't know they had. One director confessed in a low voice, I haven't felt this introspective in 20 years. Another nodded. He walks like a man who made peace with something we don't even know we're fighting. In a pharmaceutical megacorp, a senior scientist replayed the footage of your calm smile as the wind swirled around you. Our whole industry is built on healing the body, she said, but what is that calm? That's not physical. That's alignment. Her colleague whispered, it's like he's carrying a technology we don't have a word for. Across continents, quiet conversations began replacing loud arguments. Executives who used to brag about market dominance were now asking questions they'd buried for years. What actually matters? Why does he feel complete? What does he know that we forgot? A CEO known for his ruthlessness sat in his dimly lit office, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly. He terrifies me, he admitted to his advisor. Not because he's powerful, but because he isn't performing his power. He just exists. And somehow, that feels higher. In South Korea, a media mogul watched the footage over tea, eyes narrowed in contemplation. We chase influence, he murmured, but he radiates it without trying. We build brands. He embodies presence. The mogul's daughter, sitting beside him, asked softly, then what is he? The man exhaled. A reminder. A reminder of what? That was the question no one wanted to say out loud. A reminder that the world had confused complexity with wisdom. That they'd mistaken noise for significance. That they'd built entire systems chasing versions of connection you carried effortlessly. Executives who once steadied markets were now steadying themselves, and in doing so, facing truths they had long ignored. Your existence didn't threaten their power. It threatened their foundations. Not because you were superior, but because you were whole. And wholeness makes ambition look small. It didn't happen all at once. There was no single revelation, no dramatic speech, no sudden cry of clarity. Instead, realization crept into the minds of the world's leaders like dawn sliding under a closed curtain. Slow. Inevitable. Impossible to ignore. It began with a silence none of them could explain. A silence inside themselves. For the first time in their careers, they weren't thinking about profit margins, quarterly projections, shareholder expectations, or geopolitical leverage. They were thinking about you. Not your power, not your anomalies, not your effect on the world, but the way you stood. The way you breathed. The way you seemed to exist without friction. The shift in perspective didn't stay internal for long. Once realization settled into the bones of the world's elite, something profound, almost uncomfortable, began to bloom inside them. Respect. Not admiration. Not fear. Not strategic interest. Something deeper, older, closer to reverence. It started quietly. In a marble office high above Manhattan, a CEO known for his brutal negotiation tactics found himself standing, not sitting, when your image appeared on the wall screen. He didn't understand why at first. Then he realized, standing felt more appropriate. Not because he felt inferior, but because something in him recognized you the way a compass recognizes north. In Geneva, the head of a powerful international council closed her eyes while rewatching the footage. He carries no weapon, she murmured, yet I feel safer watching him than I do with 1,000 guards. Her deputy nodded slowly. Because he doesn't project threat. He projects truth. A truth that didn't need force. A truth that didn't need defense. A truth that didn't need validation.